Hello everyone, I'm Trevor,
And I'm Atrey.
and today we'll be going over basic robotics team management and the notebook.
So let's get started. So first, we'll be defining what management is. So it's the traditional things, guiding your team members. But also in robotics, there's things like communicating with parents or mentors. And this is often for before competitions or for meetings to plan on what we're going to talk about. And then also the team needs to work with the management to establish clear goals. So an example of this is if you have a competition coming up, then a clear timeline of when each part should get done. Um, and then we'll see what management isn't. So it isn't just telling people what to do. So you give them deadlines and goals that you discuss with them, but you don't keep telling team members to be like, oh, go build this part, go assemble this. Um, and then on the opposite side, don't do everything yourself. There are a few times where management tries to do everything by themselves, and it often doesn't turn out well. Also, management means that you shouldn't be overly critical of other people. We all make mistakes and we should all learn from it. And by being overly critical, you're also creating a toxic mood, which is my next point, which creates members that aren't motivated and they won't want to come to robotics and the room every day to work on the robot.
So management isn't just managing, there's a lot more in robotics. This includes maintaining the notebook, organizing and going to outreach events, maintaining business and financial records, social media, and cross-team collaboration.
So we'll first talk about organization meetings. So as I said before, organization meetings are where team members work with parents, mentors, and other team members to figure out what their goals are, and then update the team every weekend on what the progress towards those goals are. So traditionally, they're held every Sunday, but each team member can decide that for themselves if someone isn't available on Sunday. And we'll be creating deadlines and what they want to talk about next week. So this is really important because it assigns tasks to people. So people are not only engaged, but they're also motivated to finish their parts on time.
So communication is a key part in maintaining a successful robotics team. Um, this includes not only communicating with your individual team, but across all of FTC, all the clubs we have at Saratoga High and our FRC team, along with cross club collaboration for outreach events. To communicate effectively, you are to discuss times for team meetings, ask parents to help volunteer, talk with mentors, and make to-do lists. All of these can be done with one platform.
So we'll be talking about a couple of different platforms. Our robotics club currently uses Slack, and some advantages of it is that it's professional and it's very easy to use. If you've ever used a messaging platform like Messenger or iMessage, it's basically like a little bit more advanced version of that. And the good thing is it can also be integrated with Google App Services. So if you want to share Google Documents or presentations, or if you need to share like a Zoom link or something, it's very easy on Slack. The only drawback to Slack that we have found is that there's a 10,000 text message limit. So if you want to access records of like past text conversations, you're going to need to pay, which our club does not. And then a second platform is Discord. So we often use Discord for like our overseas outreach. One of our team members is currently using Discord to talk to FTC teams in India. So it is less professional because it is gaming oriented, but it is also very easy to use. And the thing is that you also get free unlimited messaging. So you can scroll up into the history as far back as you want. And there's also integrated video and voice calling, which is useful for these international outreach types.
Okay, so one of the main parts of a robotics team and leadership is the notebook. This is often the deciding factor if a team is successful, and is arguably more important than the actual robot. Inside your notebook, you should be documenting everything you do, including your team meetings, your finances, and your outreach.
So for the first part of like the notebook and recording is the poster. So when you go to tournaments, you have a small table where you set up, and that functions as a place for your poster and also to fix your robot. So you can see these are two posters. On the left is the one our team made, and then on the right is the one that a veteran team made this year. So you can see that there's a lot of photos that shows the hardware and each individual part, any outreach activities that each team had, and then also CAD and social media links, which is important if you want to work with other teams in the area again in the future. So it can either be one poster high, like the one on the left, or multiple posters high and multiple posters thick, like the one on the right.
So one of the first things that you put in your notebook is a summary page. This is a little 1 to 2 page document that discusses, talks a little bit about your team, who you guys are, one of your team models. It also highlights some of the pages that you want the judges to look at. For our case, we highlighted some pages of our design section, our research in computer vision, and some of our outreach events.
So another part of the notebook that usually follows after the summary page is the team bios. And as it looks, it's just a short description of each team member and a photo of them. And it's also nice to include the team mentors because they're also part of the team and they're very important to the team's success. So now here we have the engineering. So this is probably going to be the bulk of your first notebook. And it's going to be filled with mostly these meeting notes. So what they are is they tell the time and place, how many people came to the meeting. And then for our team, we like to have an agenda. So what happened in the last meeting for people who missed the last meeting? And is there anything new that we needed to do between this and last meeting? And then the notes consist of what you do throughout the meeting. So it's good to include like strong details. A lot of teams, they just include like superficial notes like we built something or we coded the autonomous, and that doesn't really tell you what you actually did. It just tells you like something general, which doesn't give a good idea to the judge of the work that went into the robot. And then usually ended off with action items. So what do we still need to finish? What do we finish today? And then the agenda for next week or the next meeting, depending on when you have meetings, and what you want to try to accomplish then.
So not only do these notes help the judges look at what you guys have been doing, they also help your team stay focused and organized. So the next part that we'll be going over is the design section. This is the engineering part of the notebook. This is where you talk about the math and the science behind it. It is also really important to include each mechanism and the different iterations we went through. Um, this is where you document every success you have, but probably more importantly, all the failures you guys had, why that happened, and what you guys learned from it.
So you can see here that there's an example of one of the iterations that we did. It's called the transfer mechanism for the blocks for this year's competition. So you can see that we started off with a really crude rubber band and like backplate design, and then you can see how it's working over on the right hand side, and you can see it grabbing onto the block. And then we also have iterations in CAD on the bottom right that show what we want to try to do in the future. So instead of having it just this small, we would attach it to this pulley system which could lift the block up. So now we have the software section. So software section, what you don't want to do is just put all your code in and then just leave the judge to see like what you did. So an example of that is on the right. But what is good is to include like small tidbits of the code, or like the most important parts, like for an autonomous routine, if there's like some really special algorithm that no other team uses, that's also good to put in the notebook, and you explain what the algorithm is and how it helps the robot navigate during the software, uh, during the autonomous period. So you can see here, there's an example of how we initialize all the motors, and how they get their direction and how often they're updated.
So when you're writing the software section, it's important to keep in mind that these judges probably have no prior knowledge of code. So you really have to explain everything, even though it might seem trivial to you. So the next part of the notebook is probably the most important part, and it's your outreach section. This is where you document all of the outreach events you've been to, um, and how they've impacted you, how they impacted the other person. Note there are two different types of outreach: outreach to the community, and outreach to like the workplace, and you should include both of them here. Um, like as you can see, for these events, we included impact on our community, a brief description, and many pictures.
Yeah, so pictures are very important. It shows what you actually did, because judges can't just look into your mind and see what you did. So pictures really help the judges visualize what your project was and how you help the community. Because one tenet of FIRST is expanding STEM ideals throughout the community, and outreach is a very fundamental part of doing this. So the next part is the business section. So this includes the finance, as you can see on the right. So that just lists what your budget is, what you spent, and what you have in total, and then what, like whether you went over your expenses or you have money for next year. And what we try to do is update our budget at least twice throughout the season. So you can see on top in the beginning, we had a budget of 2,500 and we only used around $3,000. But then you can see during the middle of the season, as we bought more things to custom make our robot, that went up to around $762. So another thing you want to do is a sustainability plan inside your notebook. So you want to identify any risks that might happen. So for example, we have low income if we don't have enough sponsorships or if people don't donate to our club. And one way to mitigate this would be to find a new grant opportunity. So these types of like graphs would help explain to the judges what problems might come up in your club, and it shows that you're prepared to tackle them. And then another thing you want to do is have like timelines. So you can see here in the middle that there's two timelines, one before our first internal competition called a scrimmage, and then the second one, which is our entire complete timeline, and the dates they're going to happen and what we want to try to accomplish before those dates.
Okay, so the safety section goes towards the end of your notebook. This is basically where you talk about first aid protocol, your club's protocol, and the people that are approved to use what machinery and what happens when it goes wrong.
So in our club, we have a very good emphasis on people should be trained on machinery, and anybody who is not trained on a specific type of machinery should not be allowed to use it. Like here, only Ria Jane is approved for the laser cutter. So that's there for a reason, and you shouldn't try to go to cut something on the laser cutter because you might get burned or you might go blind, and that's something the club does not want to happen to its students. So another fundamental part of management is attendance. So this just records who came and who the parents were, and it also has a dual purpose of showing the number of meetings you have, which might be important in competitions when you're talking to judges. And it's just good to see if attendance is lacking or if there's a lot of people attending, because that shows like your team's motivation. And yeah.
So other than the notebook and the poster, there are some other things that might not necessarily be necessary. However, the presentation is something that is very necessary. This is what you give to the judges in your judging session, and it documents and it talks about basic hardware that you guys have on your robot, software, and outreach events. However, there are also pamphlets which you can make to hand to judges and other teams. Um, these are not necessary, but they look really nice. And picture books help document your journey.
So you can see that on the top left, on the top right, we have an example of a pamphlet. So on the front, it's just a picture of our team. On the back, it's our social media. And then inside, it's just outreach and then what our robot consists of. So the final component that management should um, keep in mind is social media. So social media is a good way of reaching out to your community. So we have a Facebook page and Instagram page for each of our teams, and we post updates or photos. And then we also have a YouTube page um, that gives like tutorials. For here, example, we have on how to design an FTC capstone, and um, it just goes in depth on a CAD program on how to design the capstone, and it's useful for other teams and then also for any prospective FTC students who might want to join in the future.
But the Instagram is also really nice. We can reach out to many other teams. Like we've reached out with teams in Michigan, um, and it's really nice to see what they're doing and their designs.
Okay, so we would like to thank you for watching and hope you enjoyed this presentation and learned something new.